Hi there. Yes, this is the new edition, the week 4 edition of the new Below the Surface weekly Bible study. So I'm glad all of y'all are here today on this. For me it's Friday. It's when I'm recording it. But anyway, whatever you're watching, I hope it's great. This is for the weekend of March 29th and 30th. So we're still in the midst of Lent. We're still in the sermon series on the parables. And again, this weekend we have 2 parables to talk about. And as you know, I just love the parables. I like the short ones. I like the long ones. The ones today are pretty straightforward. They're pretty easy to understand. It's not in the understanding that the problem lies. It's in the living it out. It's in the challenge that they present us. So we will be offered that challenge today as we begin to step through this. So I invite you to grab a Bible. I'm reading from the NIV, copyright 2011. When I first thought about doing this video series, this vlog as the young people call it, I didn't think I would read the passage. Instead I would just talk about it. But I'm finding that I really have a desire to read through the scripture passage, at least most of it, and talk about it. Because I really do want us to try to get a little bit below the surface. I'll try to point out some things along the way that will be helpful. Again, neither one of these this week is a complicated parable or difficult to understand. So with that, I'm just going to suggest we plunge in. So if you would, open to Matthew 18, Matthew chapter 18, verse 21. And that will give us the immediate context for the parable. All right? And we'll press on from there. Matthew 18, verse 21. I'll give you a second to find it while I take a sip of my coffee here. All right. So here is the necessary context. Verse 21. Then Peter came to Jesus, and he asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And 7 times is, that's a lot, right? I guess. 7 is kind of this number of perfection and completeness, or 7 days in the week and so forth. But that's the question, Tell me, Jesus, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister? So that is the entree for Jesus to offer to Peter a parable about forgiveness. And again, it's a very pointed, wonderful parable, really. So here's Jesus' answer. Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." Or, depending on which ancient manuscript you're using, 70 times 7, 490 times. The point is, it's not something to be counted. Right? You're not supposed to say, "Oh, I forgive you." Let's see, 1. I forgive you. 2. I forgive you. 3. No, you're just supposed to forgive. Get out of this counting thing. Occasionally when I've taught this, I've thought about the 490, the 70 times 7, and I've thought, my goodness, if I forgave somebody 490 times, once every day for 490 days, and I really strive to mean it, I think by the end of 490 days I would actually mean it. But I don't know. I don't think that's probably what Jesus has in mind. He's just saying, get out of this counting business. We're talking about forgiveness here. So then Jesus says, "Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him." Now let me tell you, 10,000 bags of gold is an indeterminate amount. It is just so enormous. It would be like the wealth of the earth, practically. It's just so enormous an amount of money. It boggles the mind. It's not real life. This is a parable. This is this vast, giant pile of wealth and gold that the servant owes the master. Well, since the servant was not able to pay, surprise, the master ordered that the servant and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. So the servant and his family, they're all going to be sold into slavery, and everything the man owns is going to be sold, and it's still, of course, going to be a pittance compared to 10,000 bags of gold. Well, as the servant fell on his knees before the master, he begged, "Be patient with me, and I will pay you back everything." I don't see how he could ever do that, but I'm sure he's sincere. "Be patient with me, and I will pay you back everything." And the servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. This huge, vast sum, he just canceled it, wiped it off the books, and let him go. But when that servant, the one who had been forgiven so much, went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. Just 100 silver coins. Not nothing. It's a little something. Compared to 10,000 bags of gold, it really is almost nothing. And this fellow servant owes the servant who had been forgiven the bags of gold 100 silver coins. Well, the servant who had been forgiven by the master grabbed him and began to choke him, all over 100 silver coins, and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. "I want my money. I want my money, man. I want my money. I want my money. I want my money." He's choking the man, physically choking the man in the parable, choking him. "I want my money. I want my money. It's 100 silver coins. I want my money." The servant fell to his knees and he begged him, "Be patient with me and I will pay it back." The same words that the fellow who has his hands around his neck said to the master. But the servant refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. Like how... Well, when the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged. And they went and told their master everything that had happened. And so the master called the servant in, the one he had forgiven the 10,000 bags of gold for, this enormous sum. And he said to him, pointedly, right, "You wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In any case, in anger, his master handed him over to the jailer to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. Now that's Semitic hyperbole. It's a dramatic ending. You're not supposed to ask the question, well, if he's being tortured, can he really ever pay that? No, it's just this. You don't want to be that guy. That's the way I think of it. You don't want to be that guy. And so then Jesus says, "This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart." So there are bookends around this parable, right? One bookend, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister? 7? Peter says, and Jesus says, 77 times 7 or 70 times 7. And then at the end, just forgive them forgive them. What is this about? This is about our readiness to accept all of the forgiveness that can be poured out on us. We pray to God all the time, forgive me, forgive me, forgive my sins. We have confessionals and all these other things that we use. Forgive me, forgive me. But are we so ready to forgive others? I think not. We hold grudges for long periods of time. We nurse them. We feed them. We're anxious to be forgiven, but very, very slow to forgive. We kind of view the forgiveness we give as being like little presents, little moments of gifts. Here, I forgive you. All right, I've got one for you, Sally. Here, I forgive you. I know, Tommy, I forgive you. Rather than just forgiving. It's not something to be counted. Here's the secret. I will give you this secret. I think it was actually, this comes from Albert Schweitzer from a long time ago. Forgiveness is not like a gift. It is like air. Air. If you're going to breathe it in, you're going to have to breathe it out. If you take a big lungful of air and you're only going to hold it for so long and then you're going to breathe it out. That's how forgiveness has to be. You have to be as ready and willing to forgive as you are ready to accept forgiveness offered to you, given to you, poured out on you by God. God is merciful to us. As Paul writes, everyone falls short of God's standard. But God has given us mercy. You know, God is just, but his justice is tempered by mercy. Good thing, because if we all got what we were due, we'd be doomed. So it's about forgiveness, and we just have to be ready to forgive. And of course, this servant who was owed 100 silver coins by a fellow servant was not. And so, in essence, his forgiveness was taken away from him in the parable. You know, this parable is not meant to be stretched to all the outer realms of Christian theology. It has a point. For me, this is a one-point parable. Forgive as you have been forgiven. Show mercy as you have been shown mercy. God is merciful, you be merciful. What's a good way to label the servant who was forgiven the 10,000 bags of gold? I don't think it's ungrateful. I don't think it's unfaithful. I think he should be labeled the unmerciful servant, because that's the issue. Would he show mercy as he received mercy? It's a great parable. Such a great point. One that I need to be reminded about. One that I think we all need to be reminded about on a regular basis, because it's just our nature. It's that darkness in the human heart that we all have that wants to hang on to our hurts, whatever insults, whatever ways we feel slighted, somebody took advantage of us, rather than just breathe out the air of forgiveness that we are so anxious to breathe in. All right, so that's the first one. I think it's pretty straightforward. So now there's another parable up for this weekend, and there we go. Okay, it is Luke 14. So we're going to go to Luke 14, and we're going to look at verse 25. Okay, so go ahead and find Luke chapter 14, verse 25. All right, so let me talk again about something I brought up in my Sunday class a few weeks ago. Semitic. A Semitic language is a language. There's a Semitic language group made up of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic, and every language has certain characteristics, certain ways people have of expressing themselves. There is a thing called Semitic hyperbole. We all use hyperbole. We all use exaggerations to make a point. It's really no different. Jesus used exaggeration. He used hyperbole, something that his audience would have recognized in order to make a point. Because Jesus is very challenging in what he says, and he doesn't want it to be heard as simply a nice little cross-stitched tip about how you might be a little better person tomorrow or something like that. No, Jesus is turning the world upside down, and he wants his listeners, his hearers, his disciples, the followers, everybody to grasp that. So, look at Luke 14, verse 25. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus. And turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." That is a great example of that Semitic hyperbole. Hate is a very strong word. It is the proverbial 2x4, upside the head kind of word, right? That really strikes you and hits you hard. This is tempered a bit in the other Gospels, but they don't lose the point here. That Jesus can never, ever, ever be the lesser love. I came across that phrase not long ago, the lesser love. Jesus cannot be the lesser love. Jesus expects loyalty. Jesus is the one we're putting our trust in. Of course he expects loyalty. He wants us to trust him and to obey because we do trust him and we will stay loyal to him. And he knew that that the arrival of the kingdom might well split families apart, but you would have to decide, are you going to live within the kingdom, or are you going to turn your back and walk away from Jesus? What would you do? And so it's saying, look, I can never be the lesser love. Whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. So that's a famous line. It's interesting. He doesn't say, well, if you have a cross, you're going to have to carry it. And he doesn't say that. He takes it as a given. Whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. It is an expectation of Jesus's. It's an expectation of Paul's. It's an expectation throughout the New Testament that coming to Jesus will entail suffering. It will entail loss. It will entail choices that can put us at odds with the world or with families, or there will be things that we once did that we will no longer do, that we might even miss some a bit, perhaps. And there were persecutions of Christians from time to time and from place to place for 300 years after Jesus. Many Christians were put in a position of having to choose, right? You're going to choose your safety, or you're going to choose your staying true to Jesus. And I'm thinking of the story in the book of Acts after Peter, John, and James have been arrested, and the disciples are all gathered waiting for news, and they're praying. And I think a lot of us today would be gathered that day. Our leaders have been arrested. We'd be praying for safety. That's not what they pray for. What they pray for is boldness. They do not want what has happened to Peter, John, and James to dissuade them to back up, right, from preaching the gospel, to cause them to back off from witnessing to Jesus. I think it's a very powerful moment early in the book of Acts. And Jesus many times is preparing his disciples for what is to come. So he says, whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Then he says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and he wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation, while the others are still a long way away, and ask for terms of peace. He'll make the calculation. He'll count the cost and decide, nope, can't fight this war. We got to find some means of peace to avoid this thing because I'm going to lose. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. So there are several things swirling through my mind every time I come to this. First of all, there's, of all people, Aristotle. Because Aristotle said there were 4 cardinal virtues. They were the cardinal because it's like a hinge on a door. There are 4 cardinal virtues. One of them is prudence / wisdom, but prudence. Prudence is counting the cost. Prudence is being able to see the consequences of your actions and then incorporate that into your actions. Being able to see what's coming if you do X or Y. And it's really, really important. A prudent person does take the time to try to work out the consequences of what they are undertaking. An imprudent person doesn't. They just plunge ahead willy-nilly and often end up in ruin. So that's this first piece about prudence and about counting the cost. And the other one is the different ways that Jesus treats people. Okay, so Jesus says, in black and white here in ink, if this was the only verse we had, in the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. And if I have that, and that's all I have, okay, I'm pretty much hearing Jesus tell me I got to go sell everything I have. I got to give it all up. Well, I don't know about you, but I haven't done that. So what gives? There was a rich young ruler who came to Jesus and said, I've done all these things I need to do. I know I've honored my parents and I haven't lied about my neighbor. I've done all these things that the law of Moses requires. And Jesus says, well, good. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go and sell all your possessions and follow me. And it says that the rich young ruler walks away saddened because he won't. All his possessions mean too much to him. And I think Jesus sees that the young man's enthusiasm is skin deep. He hasn't and that he is too wedded to what he has. And he can't even contemplate the notion of giving it all up and starting to follow Jesus. But there's another person Jesus meets. That's Zacchaeus in Luke. I think it's Luke 19. The short little tax collector who climbs up in the tree, and then Jesus invites himself to lunch with Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is so overwhelmed by being in Jesus' presence that he says, look, this is what my paraphrase is. I've basically defrauded lots of people. I've cheated lots of people, because that's the way tax collectors were seen. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to repay them 4 times over. Jesus never says to Zacchaeus, you have to give up everything you have. He doesn't say that to him. Zacchaeus has taken the initiative to give up everything that he has. I mean, to go and repay, Scott, to go and repay people 4 times over when he's cheated them. Jesus here wants us to grasp that following Jesus comes with a cost. A cost. And if we don't know that, our faith is cheapened and our faith is weakened. We need to know the cost. Not only that we'll might be expected to pay, but that God has paid. I want to read you something. I brought this to my class on Sunday because it fit well with what we were talking about. But this is a famous little bit of writing from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who was hung by the Nazis in 1945 because he participated in the assassination plot against Hitler. And he wanted to talk about cheap grace and costly grace, okay? Because grace is just poured out on us. It's God's unmerited favor. You can't earn it. You can't buy it. But that doesn't mean it's cheap. So let me just read to you what he wrote, okay? Cheap grace is the deadly enemy of our church. Cheap grace means grace is a doctrine, a principle, a system. It means forgiveness of sin proclaimed as a general truth. The love of God taught as the Christian conception of God. Cheap grace is the grace we bestow on ourselves. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance. Baptism without church discipline. Communion without confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Christ living and incarnate. Costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, a man will gladly go and sell all that he has. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life, and it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies or righteouses the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of his Son. And here he quotes Paul, "You were bought at a price." And what price is that? The life of Jesus. You were bought at a price. And what has cost God so much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our life. but delivered him up for us. Costly grace is the incarnation of God. For the creator of the cosmos to take on human flesh and to be born and to live and to suffer and to die. Why? For us. Indeed, we were bought at a price. Indeed, our salvation with God cost God the life of his own Son. Don't ever lose that. Don't ever diminish it in any way. Make it real in your heart. Make it genuine in your heart. We die to our old selves, Paul says. He says, we have been crucified. Indeed, we have set aside our old lives. And then he goes on to say, and we have been resurrected to new life. That's why you can't ever see the truth of Jesus as meaning some useful tips to help you get by day to day, or to be a little better husband or a little better parent or a little better person. That's not it. It is about God stepping into time and space almost 2,000 years ago to rescue us from ourselves, to be for us who we are unable and unwilling to be for ourselves. And everything's different on this side. Everything's different for us when we look back over our lives. Many, I've known people who've known Jesus for their entire lives, and what a wonderful, profound thing that is. But for many of us, we can point to a season or a time, or for some folks even a day, it seems, when they really embraced Jesus and became new persons, reborn, as Jesus tells Nicodemus, reborn in the Spirit. And it's not about that. Remember the parable about the sower and the sower of the seed? I think that was last week. And the seed that falls on the ground that has real thin soil and just it's all enthusiastic. And then, of course, the enthusiasm dies away, and so do the people's faith. We can't be those people. We do have to count the cost. We do have to be ready. We do have to keep our eyes open as we walk toward Jesus, understanding that when we come to faith in Jesus Christ, we are embracing new life, and we could never be the same. And the world will never look the same to us, because the world can never be the same. So I just invite you this week to really reflect upon that. Maybe read back over these two parables in the next couple of days before the preachers bring them this weekend, and ask yourself, how do I reflect to the world this new life that I have been given in Jesus Christ? So with that, I will say adios, and I will see you here again next week. Bye-bye.